Welcome to the first session in the module on the organisational implications of coaching. In this one we're going to think about an organisation's learning and development strategy. The objectives of this session are that you'll be able to firstly identify the factors involved in a learning and development strategy. You'll be able to discuss methods for ensuring strategic alignment and evaluate models for creating a learning and development strategy. I'm wondering, does your organisation have a learning and development strategy? And if so, what sort of strategy does it have? Here's a quote from Mayo. It says, "So we have to ask ourselves, are we being driven seriously by identified business needs, or are we making our own interpretation of what we think the organisation needs?" This quote from Mayo suggests that it's important to consider how the learning and development strategy is arrived at. Has it been arrived at as a result of a considered business plan with clearly identified business needs, and the learning and development strategy has been developed to meet these needs? Or is it, as is found in many organisations, a result of someone or a group of people sitting down and concocting something they think might be useful from the general way the organisation is operating? That thought begs two important questions. In what ways does learning and development impact on business performance? And how should HRD departments be involved in developing business strategy? Write down your answers to both of these. Jarvis et al. In The Case for Coaching suggests that effective learning and development is there to improve employee performance in terms of the employee's ability, motivation or engagement, and employee opportunities. And furthermore, that learning and development activities increase the amount of what is known as discretionary behaviour. That is, where employees want to do well, where they go out of their way to do the best for the organisation. Jarvis et al. State that this happens because learning and development activities make people feel valued, give them the skills they need to do their work well, help people to introduce change more easily, help people to take more responsibility for themselves, and help them to take more initiative over getting results. An important part of that is people taking more responsibility for their own learning, and with this, an emphasis now being placed on learning as opposed to training. So the question from that is, how aligned is the learning and development strategy? It's the employee performance that then drives organisational performance. Cost-effective human resource and human resource development investment will bring about results in terms of labour productivity and in the quality of the product or service delivered. And all that is shown in business performance outcomes. So the more effective the learning and development, the higher the employee performance and the better organisational performance, leading to increased business performance outcomes. Mayo, in creating a learning development strategy, identifies two types of alignment, vertical and horizontal. Let's start by thinking about vertical alignment. So how much does the learning and development strategy of an organisation align with its overall human resource strategy? And how much does it align with the overall business strategy? Is the learning and development strategy development in isolation from all the other strategies? Is it developed by thinking about what learning and development think would be good for the organisation? Or because learning and development think some new idea they've come across would be great? Mayo also goes on to describe the importance of considering both operational and strategic demands when developing the strategy. Is learning and development helping managers working with the senior management team to come up with longer-term strategic plans to move the organisation forward? And is it working with individual managers and departments to reach their long-term goals? Those are the strategic demands. As far as operational demands are concerned, then is learning and development responding to managers for demands for development activities as a result of regular personal development plans or appraisals? And do they meet regularly with managers to help them with suggestions, ideas and advice on how they can reach their outcomes? Next, we have horizontal alignment. How much is the learning and development strategy aligned with the other human resource practices and policies? When changes happen in one area of human resources, are they made throughout the whole human resource function? For example, one organisation who I worked with, when newly introduced performance bonuses meant that employees did not want to spend time on development activities, because if they spent time on learning and development activities, their productivity bonus would be reduced. So a new practice in the rewards section of human resources resulted in people not wanting to attend learning and development events. So how can you create a learning and development strategy? Well, one approach to creating it is given by Rosemary Harrison in Learning and Development. The first step is to put together a strategy development team in order to bring new ideas and expertise from all parts of the organisation and to enable debate and challenging to take place. This is important to keep the process from getting stale and old hat. Next is to clarify the organisational mission. What is the purpose of the organisation? How does it fit in with everything outside of itself? What are its long-term goals? The third step is to explore the core values. This would include how the employees perceive the organisation, what the espoused values of the organisation are and whether they're shared, and who are the stakeholders and are their needs being met, and how is Learning and Development Department and its contribution viewed. The fourth step is to carry out a SWOT or a PESTLE analysis. SWOT being strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. The strengths and the weaknesses being from internal analysis and the opportunities and threats being from external analysis. PESTLE being an external analysis tool that considers political, economic, sociological, technological, legal and environmental influences on the organisation. And the last step is to agree on the learning and development strategy and the strategic plan. This involves agreeing on the long-term goals and the short-term learning and development goals in order that the organisation as a whole can reach its aims, mission and goals according to its values and for all levels within the organisation. It's also important to build flexibility into the process so that the plan can move with the needs of the organisation, its teams and its individuals. Harrison highlights the issues for training and development professionals. They are to fit in with the organisation's overall strategy and yet to have flexibility to handle local level needs. That the strategy fits in with all other human resource strategies in the organisation. That the strategy has the agreement of all the stakeholders, and that the managers throughout the organisation are willing and capable of delivering the strategy. And finally, that there are clear and easy ways of evaluating and monitoring the effectiveness of the plans and strategies. Mayo's approach also starts with strategic analysis in terms of carrying out a SWOT analysis, but also includes looking at the core competencies that are needed, considering the environmental studies and the projections put forward by the marketing department. He then suggests strategic goal setting in view of growth, customer satisfaction, profitability and market share required, and then to choose routes to those goals in terms of resources, systems, processes, capabilities and partnerships. And that these two processes will cycle until the strategy has been chosen. And then, of course, there comes implementation. And into this comes the process of leveraging resources so that the desired resources are in the right place at the right time to implement the strategy. To measure progress and to manage change and any conflicts that may arise from the implementation. He also suggests that there are 3 key components of a human resource development strategy. First, an umbrella strategy that has policies, etc. in place to support what the organisation wants to achieve in its total strategy and plan. Then specific proactive and remedial strategies to support the goals and objectives. And finally, a functional strategy which looks at the human resource department's own needs for learning and development.